Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Demai Chapter 3, Halacha 4. This is part 3 of the shiur and the finale for this 3-part shiur. And wow, what a doozy. We have a Mishneh here that comes along and says that when you give the custodian the box of produce, the box of grain, to the idol worshiper is giving you back definite Tevel. Now, there's a lot going on here. When you look at the parallel of this in Bechorot, page 11b, in the Bavli, Rashi is writing that basically like the opinion of Rabbi Meir. He's basically writing over there that the land still has some semblance of kedusha, so that if the idol worshiper grew the crop on the land and then at the time of smoothing, say a Jewish sharecropper came and purchased the crop from the idol worshiper, that there's still kedusha there, he would have to separate out tithes. He can't just go and eat it. That is not going to be the halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa is going to follow the Rambam, who's opposed to Rashi over there, and he's going to be saying that it does not have any kedusha, would not have to separate out tithes. And also, over here, the Rambam is holding that when you get the box back from the idol worshiper, it's not Tevel, and you don't need to separate tithes at all. Those are a lot of big hiddushes. Now, the Rambam's point can be also, there's another sugya that's commented by the Rambam that's saying over here that, well, maybe the idol worshiper didn't switch the box, or if he did switch the box, maybe he gave you the box from a haver who also has it in storage, or maybe he gave you a box of Demai from Am Haaretz who has it in storage. Maybe he didn't switch it with his own box. So there's a lot going on here. Now, we're left with the problem that, wait a second, the Mishneh says something very specific. The Mishneh says that you're getting back something that looks like you need to tithe it. And we're left with coming back to what's going to be coming up, which is going to be some really big twists and turns. It's going to turn out that Rebbe, the big hiddush here, the big surprise here, the big reveal, is going to be that Rebbe actually changes what the Tanna Kama says. And that's a big shock. So Rabbi Meir is going to have an opinion that is going to be that and it's going to be a debate between two Tanaim. So one Tana versus two Tanaim, it's going to go with the two Tanaim. So he's the minority opinion. And nonetheless, Rebbe is putting the minority opinion in here as the Tanna Kama. That's a big shock. That's a big chiddush. And in going through the rest of Chapter 3, Halacha 4, we're going to see why that is. Why is that? Because when the Olei Bavel came back, they accepted upon themselves to do Meiser Sheni. It was not Doraita at the time. And they took it upon themselves. And what Rebbe and what we're going to see from Rabbi Yochanan were worried about is that if you made this generally known that this was really just like they're taking it upon themselves, and it's maybe Am Haaretzes would see that and they would uproot Meiser Sheni, the obligation of what they're already doing with Meiser Sheni, and that would also uproot Demai as well. They wouldn't be separating anything. So they were separating some tithes, and basically if you made this known, you would end up with a situation where people would just not separate anything. There'd be no Demai. There'd be no Maseket Demai. It would just be a theoretical thing that nobody was actually doing. Very big shocker. So what did Rebbe do? Rebbe put in the minority opinion of Rabbi Meir. Halacha is not by Rabbi Meir. But you say, wait a second. Rabbi Meir's opinion is, okay, you put in a box with the idol worshiper. Idol worshiper gives you back Tevel. Rabbi Meir's opinion is that the land has Kedusha, like what Rashi's saying, and when the idol worshiper grew something on it, regardless of the ownership, it's supposed to have tithes taken out of it. It's always supposed to have tithes taken out of it. And so effectively by saying that, it looks like if you're giving the box to the idol worshiper, you're going to get back Tevel. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Why? Because Rabbi Meir says he grew it here. It still has Kedusha, and you're getting back something that has to, have tithes taken out of it. So there's a lot here. So when it's saying the Tanakama, Rebbe actually turns out that he wrote the minority opinion as the Tanakama, which is why you end up saying, well, wait a second, if Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai at the end is saying, no, you're getting back to Demai, and that's going to be a Derabanan thing. It's going to be, there's no Kedusha in the land, but anyway, if you're going to be getting the produce from the idol worshiper, you should be tithing it as Demai nonetheless, even though there's no Kedusha, and that's going to be a Derabanan requirement. It's not going to be a Deraita requirement. Rabbi Meir's opinion and the opinion of the Mishneh that Rebbe writes in is going to reflect a Deraita opinion that you got back definite Tevel. Rabbi Shimon is saying, no, you're getting back Demai, and it's only going to be, not because there's Suffolk Tevel here, but because of a Derabanan requirement to tithe it anyway. So a lot going on here. Halacha L'maisa is going to go by the Rambam. Halacha L'maisa is not going to be going by the Rashi. And we have a historical note that is a wrinkle in what we usually see here. It's very rare that you see Rebbe writing in the minority opinion as the Tanakama, as if that's going to be the halacha. And that's why you have to dig into the Gemaras, and you can't just rely on rulings of the Mishnahs, because this Mishnah does not reflect the halacha. That is not the halacha. And neither, by the way, is going to be Rabbi Shimon. Actually, the Rambam's writing that in this case, Rabbi Shimon's view is actually going to be the stringent view. That's also a big hiddush. So a lot going on here, a lot of historical reason. Why is all of this being done? Because Rebbe, and as they're going to be talking about Rabbi Yochanan, they're all worried that Amoratzim are going to learn this and they're going to stop doing tithes altogether. And they're just going to really publicize this, and they're going to uproot everything, and whatever they're tithing, they're just not going to tithe anymore. And there's a real concern for that. So let's get into this very interesting and historically rich set of Gemaras. And the Gemara is going to pose a contradiction from what we were talking about. Yesterday, what we were talking about is when we go through the logic of all of what the Tanakhama is saying, when you go through the logic of it, you come up with the Tanakhama effectively saying Rabbi Meir's opinion, which is going to be that you got back Deraita Tevel. That, again, is not the halacha, and for historical reasons, that's being published there to keep the populace from learning about. They'll say, anyway, this is like made up from the rabbis, God forbid, and I don't really need to do these tithes. And anyway, this is going to be D'Rabbanan anyway. So they're showing it as strict to protect this. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yeshua ben Kavsai says, and by the way, he's going to be saying something that is going to be also in contradiction of a Mishnah. He says, all my days I would read the verse that states, and the Tahor person will sprinkle on the Tamei person. Now, I want you to pay attention. This, by the way, is going to be singular in both cases, that you have a Tahor person and you have a Tamei person. Both are singular. And he's going to be referring to a verse in Numbers 19:19. This is talking about the purification process of someone who gets tumas met. And the process is the Torah says a tahor person has to sprinkle the hatas water and has to sprinkle it on the tamei person. That's going to be, by the way, on the third and seventh day to get rid of the tumas met. Now, he's saying this is singular. He's saying that you're supposed to understand this as being in the singular, that a single tahor person is going to sprinkle on a single tamei person. And that, by the way, the Mishneh is going to be saying, over in Makshirin 210, saying that it's effective when you sprinkle it on many people. And this, let's say you have one tahor person and many tamei people. The Mishneh over there is saying that that's going to be valid. So you have a disagreement here, and that's going to be interesting. Now, we don't have a Gemara to Makshirin, so it would be interesting to look at because Rabbi Yeshua ben Kavsai is disputing this Mishnah. And by the way, you can see a Tosefta where this dispute comes up as well in 110. So it would be interesting to see if that would actually be the halacha l'maisa. Anyway, this gets back to our case. Why does it get back to our case? Because we know there's a link between tamei and tahor, and a link between whether something is going to have ties taken out and not. So over here, the case is going to be where what happens if you're giving, the case is going to be coming up, what's going to be happening if you have to give to the idol worshiper to hold, and now you're worried about things that are going to be tamei and tahor. So what are you going to do over there? So the Gemara is going to say that about purification, that as it's talking about, that has to be done by one tahor person. He's sprinkling the hatas water on one tamei person, and he's basically saying that it's not one tahor person who's sprinkling on many tamei people. And that's what he's saying that he thought it was. And the Gemara continues, says, until I learned the correct law from a ruling concerning the storehouse of Yavna. Why is it talking about the storehouse of Yavna? On doing research, the Marafulda is saying that in Yavna in particular, the minority of people who had storage units to hold storage of these boxes was Jews, and the majority of people who did this business were Kuthians. Now again, you have this time where, half of the time in this Gemara, it's talking about when they were considered Jews, and the other time is when they were disqualified as full-blown idol worshippers. So the Gemara says that the sages argue with Rabbi Meir concerning the storehouses in which Jews and idol worshippers would say that even if all the produce of the storehouse is from the idol worshiper and a single Jew places product in it, then all the product is treated as Demai and not definite Tevel. And that ruling, now if you're going to go look at tamei and tahor, is basically saying that one tahor person sprinkling the hatas water would work even on many tamei people. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Kavsai is actually concluding that his original assumption that a tahor person may not sprinkle hatas water on many tamei people is actually going to be negated, and his original assumption is actually going to be shown to not be true, because when you look at the storehouses of Yavna, this, by the way, is going to follow the opinion of the sages. Why is that going to be? Marafulda is going to pull it together. He's going to say that just as one measure of Demai supplied by the Jew is going to render the entire storehouse, which contains many measures of Tevel supplied by idol worshippers, as tahor, so too one tahor person can sprinkle hatas water on many tamei people and render them all tahor. Now I want to look at the commentary by Rabbi Kanievsky on it. He's going to say that in light of the fact that the two cases appear unrelated, many commentators explain that Rabbi Yeshua ben Kavsai does not mean to cite the sage's ruling as an actual source for ruling that one tahor person can sprinkle and purify many Tamei people. Rather, he's citing that this is merely to illustrate the idea of one rendering many tahor. So that's going to be the idea here. Now, this is a little bit difficult to understand, and so if the two cases are unrelated, or it looks like it's unrelated, on what grounds does Rabbi Yeshua ben Kavsai retract his original assumption? And the original assumption is that you can only have one tahor person sprinkling on one tamei person. So there's various suggestions as to how the laws are actually going to be connected, and actually, when we look earlier at the laws of tamei and tahor and the requirements of separation, you can see that there is a link. So the idea here is that if the sages are going to be treating questionable product as demai and not definite tevel, then even when the majority of product is from the idol worshiper, then surely they're going to end up treating this questionable product as demai, not tevel. And that is going to show something very interesting, because you say, wait a second, what is going on with this Mishnah? Because this Mishnah says you're getting back definite tevel. Again, the punchline is going to be that Rebbe is showing this to be like Rabbi Meir's opinion, and the halacha is not like Rabbi Meir's opinion. This is to protect the institution that exists of already having ties, because they believe that there's so much danger that if the Am Haaretz learned about this, they would just stop separating altogether. You would basically uproot the institution and they just stop doing anything. So the Gemara says that this stands in contradiction to what we learned in this Mishnah. Yes, it does. That, if, says this Gemara, if one deposits his rectified produce by an idol worshiper, the produce is treated like the idol worshipper's produce, which is definite tevel. But why is that? Why is that? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Elazar said the sages recorded in our Mishnah are the sages who follow the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and not the same as the sages of this Baraisa that we're talking about who are arguing with Rabbi Meir. That's not going to be the opinion. Rabbi Yochanan's going to argue with his student on it. Rabbi Elazar is basically saying that there's two sets of Tanakama here, and this is being recorded as the Tanakama who are following Rabbi Meir's opinion, and that's why it's going to look like Rabbi Meir's opinion, and it's not going to be the other Tanakama opinion that is going to be ruling that it's not ruled definite tevel. That's actually not what's going to be happening here. What's going to be happening is Rebbe's actually going to be taking Rabbi Meir's opinion, the minority opinion, and putting it in here as if it is the Tanakama. Again, this is to preserve the institution of whatever tithing they have. This is to protect whatever institution of Demai that they have going on here. Because if the Amoratzim learned that the Ole Bavel only accepted this to separate the Meiser Sheni, and that it's not actually, Deraita at this time, then they're gonna rebel and not do anything. So Rabbi Yochanan's going to clarify this, and he's going to basically be saying, and actually, no, this is actually what's happening. Rabbi Yochanan says the sages of the Mishnah are the actual sages who argue with Rabbi Meir in this Baraisa, and that's also surprising. So it's going to get. Marafuld is going to say like this. He's going to say Rabbi Yochanan's arguing that the Tanakama's view, which is presented anonymously as if it's the view of the sages, is indeed the view of the sages, reflecting the view of the general consensus and not of Rabbi Meir. Now, the Rabbi Yochanan students are going to challenge this, and they're going to ask, and they say, but the sages of this Mishnah are the very same sages who argue with Rabbi Meir, and then the question comes up, what is the reason that they deem the deposit definite tevel? So if the Mishnah is reflecting the view of the sages and not Rabbi Meir, why are the sages going to be more stringent here than in this Baraisa regarding the storehouse? So it's going to turn out that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't really want to answer any of this, and he doesn't really want to. He doesn't really want to give the real reason of what's going on here. So it looks like perhaps Rabbi Elazar has an opinion that's reflecting what Rabbi Yochanan is trying to do to protect what's happening. In other words, they're coming along and they're saying that there's two sets of Tanna Kama here, and one set is reflecting the view of Rabbi Meir, and one is reflecting the view that's dissenting with Rabbi Meir. And they're saying that they're talking about the Tanna Kama, who is actually going to be Rabbi Meir's view. But then that's going to be opposed to just saying that, no, actually what Rebbe did was took Rabbi Meir's view, which is the minority view, not a Tanna Kama view, but actually just like not a consensus, actually just the minority view, and present it as if this is the Tanna Kama or a group of Tanna Kama. So Rabbi Yochanan doesn't really want to reply on when the students start probing into this and say, but wait a second, how can you have two sets of Tanna Kama here? Rabbi Yochanan replies to him, and he said to them, when you grow old, I will tell you the reason. And in other words, Marafulda is saying that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't want to answer the young students because his answer shows a leniency, and he prefers it not to be known what this leniency is. And the Gemara is questioning and saying, what would he have told these young students? In other words, what explanation of the sage's ruling here did Rabbi Yochanan withhold from his students, and why is he withholding the explanation, and what is this leniency? So the Gemara explains that the view of the sages accords with the opinion of the one who says concerning the returnees from the Babylonian exile that they accepted the obligations of maestros upon themselves voluntarily. Let me explain this with the Mara Panim. Basically, the obligation of maestros depends on the sanctity of Eretz Yisrael. Now, the original sanctification of Yeshua's era lapsed at the time of the destruction of the temple and the exile of the Jewish people. So, really, when the Babylonian exiles are returning, the Ezra is vesting the land with the sanctity of Eretz Yisrael, and that's according to a lot of opinions, including Rabbi Lazar, that it's not going to be a Doraita sanctification. It's not going to be. Some are going to say that Ezra's sanctification of land is effective under biblical law. Others, like Rabbi Lazar, are saying it's not. It's just a Rabbanan. Now, the Jews nonetheless accepted upon themselves voluntarily to do this mitzvah. So, what would happen is, if they found out that this was really just a rabbinic decree that they ended up just accepting, then people are not going to be tithing the entire stock as Demai, because they would say, well, there's no biblical Tevel prohibition. So even with a Jew's produce, there's no Tevel prohibition. So then what would happen is it would look like, they would uproot the maestros obligation. So what are they doing? They're making an anonymous Mishneh according to Rebbe's opinion, where Rebbe's opinion says no, that the Kedusha of the land is Doraita. Rabbi Meir is saying it's Doraita, and even if a non-Jew grows produce on it, you still have to tithe it under a Doraita obligation. And they're putting that in so that it doesn't look like it's a voluntary thing on something D'Rabbanan. What other things did we see with Ezra that the Jewish people uprooted? Well, we see going to the mikveh. We know that the laws of Baal Keri were uprooted because the people were like, oh, it's just too hard. And what they were afraid of is a similar kind of thing where they would say, look, it's just too hard to keep these monetary rules on your grain, and we're going to just cut it out. We're just going to stop doing it, just like we stopped doing the Baal Keri laws, and you're going to basically be uprooting it. So the Gemara is going to go through more about why Rabbi Yochanan is withholding the answer from the students. And Shmuel Barba asks and says, it would be understandable if the students had asked Rabbi Yochanan concerning the laws of Tuhoros and he did not tell the answer, because we could say that he withheld the reason as a safeguard for the laws of Tuhoros. And similarly, if, says this Gemara, he had not answered the question regarding the laws of Kodashim, you could say he did not tell him because he wanted to safeguard the laws of Kodashim. But in our case, the students are asking on Maestros, and that generally is not subject to safeguards. Yet here, he did not want to tell him the answer, and he didn't want to reveal the answer because of these serious repercussions. And the Gemara says that even if he had told them his reason, what he would have told them with respect to Maestros could cause a problem. And what would that problem be? And the Gemara answers. It says the answer that he withheld is that the view of the sages accords with the opinion of the one concerning the returnees from the Babylonian exile, that they accepted the obligation of Maestros upon themselves voluntarily. And really, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that by revealing this answer that they accepted Maestros upon themselves voluntarily, it'll have serious repercussions because they're basically saying that all of this is D'Rabbanan, and they accepted separating Maestros, which is going to be D'Rabbanan, on something that's not even suspect Tevel. And anyway, even from a non-Jew or from a Jew, there's nothing Tevel there. That's also going to be just D'Rabbanan. And they're going to look at this and they're going to say, why am I taking out tithes, and then why am I even taking out 10% of these tithes as, Meiser Shani of Demai? Why am I doing any of this? Because it adds up to a lot of money. Why am I doing this? And they're going to basically get rid of this. So concerning the Mishneh's case of rectified produce that's deposited by the idol worshiper, the Gemara is talking about different aspects of the Tanakhama's view. And we're going to get into the view of the definite Tevel and Rabbi Shimon's view. And it's now going to get into Rabbi Shimon's view. So Rabbi Yerushalmi cited Rabbi Chia, who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Shimon, who treats the returned produce as Demai, is concluding that the depositor must separate its tithes under rabbinic law. So the Pnei Moshe is saying about this that Rabbi Yochanan taught that although Rabbi Shimon says that the produce is Demai, he does not mean that the produce is actual Demai, in which case the depositor would not have to separate Truma from it. Only that the Trumas Meiser would have to be separated and given to a Kohen, and the Meiser Rishon can be designated, but it can't be eaten. Rabbi Shimon looks like it could be saying that the produce is uncertain Tevel, which would look like Demai, and so that when there's a concern that it may be given, it may be Tevel, and if it were, in the case of the idol getting back to the non-Jewish custodian, you would worry that, well, maybe you're getting back, you're getting back suspect Tevel, in which case you would have to separate out, Truma Gadola and Meiser Rishon and like that. And so when we're talking about Rabbi Shimon's view, we're asking the question, is Rabbi Shimon mean that you're getting back from the idol worshiper, you're getting back questionable Tevel, or you're getting back actual Demai? That's really the question. So the Gemara is going to ask and say, but if so, it emerges that Rabbi Shimon, who rules the produce Demai, is saying that he must separate out the tithes. And the rabbis, the Tanakhama, who rule that the product is definite Tevel, says likewise that he must separate out the tithes. So what is going to be the difference? So it looks like Rabbi Shimon is saying that the produce is treated as actual Demai. It's not treated like suspect Tevel. And so even if you're going to look at saying like, okay, under D'Rabbanan, and you're going to say that some of this is going to be D'Rabbanan and things like that, well, maybe Rabbi Shimon says when you're getting back Demai, maybe he really means that you're getting back suspect Tevel, in which case there's a big problem to eat the Meiser Rishon. The Meiser Rishon would have serious problems because if you ate that, you'd have death from heaven. And if it's going to just be Demai and not questionable Tevel, then if you did happen to eat the Meiser Rishon, then you're not going to have death from heaven. Big deal, right? So what would end up happening? In either case, you have to you're allowed to sell this to the Cohen. In the case of it being questionable questionable Tevel, you can sell it to the you can sell it. So the Gemara is going to answer that Rabbi Shimon says that while he must separate the tithes and give it to the Cohen and Levi, he does not need to give it to them for free. Rather, he can take money for the gifts of the tribe. But the rabbis are saying that if he separates tithes and gives it to the Levim and the Cohen, he does not take money from the tribe. So the question here is if you're going to be following the view that it's going to be suspect Tevel, the Tanakama here, in this case just Rabbi Meir, is basically going to be saying that whatever you're separating out has to be given to the Kohen and the Levim for free. And if it's going to be just uncertain Tevel, then it's just going to be Demai, and it's not going to be like a question of that. Maybe this is really just Tevel. Then the monetary claim is going to be doubtful, and under the principle of being doubtful, in a court of law, they wouldn't be able to prove that this hadn't already been separated. So they wouldn't be able to get this. So that you're allowed to sell this to them. They can't just take this, not their right from the tribe, either tribe. So the Gemara now is going to get into Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of the dispute, and it's going to say, how can Rabbi Yochanan say that the rabbis do not allow the depositor to take money from the tribe? Why? Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, the tithes separating from this deposit are not even as stringent as the truma of outside of the land of Israel. Now, the Gemara is going to continue and say, if this were truma of the outside of the land of Israel under consideration, you would say that perhaps you give it to the Kohen and he does not take money of the tribe. And of course that's not true. And basically, you would, truma from outside of the land does not need to be given to a Kohen for free. And because it's not theirs. And only the product from the border of Eretz Yisrael and inside the border of Eretz Yisrael can a Kohen or a Levi demand and get it because it's really theirs. In the case where all of this becomes suspect, then you can sell it to them. So the Gemara is going to finish up and it's going to say perhaps Rabbi Yochanan is teaching that this was stated out of concern that the product might have been exchanged with the product of a non-Jew, but concerning the basic law of Tevel from a non-Jew, about which was taught in a Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say that a non-Jew can have ownership of land in Eretz Yisrael and exempt it from the requirement of tithes. Now, the Gemara is going to say the opposite opinion, imply about the opposite opinion. Rabbi Meir, who they're arguing with, the minority opinion, Rabbi Meir is saying that the land always has Kedusha, and whether a non-Jew grows product on it or not, the product has Kedusha and is subject to tithes, and also, according to Rabbi Meir, the non-Jew can't even own the land anyway. He's just sitting on it, can't own it. So the Gemara is going to finish up and it's going to say it was concerning this ruling of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yirmiyah, cited by Rabbi Chia, who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Shimon concedes that a Jew who eats product grown there must separate out the tithes under rabbinic law. In other words, this is what we were talking about yesterday. According to Rabbi Shimon, a non-Jew can acquire the land in Eretz Yisrael, and that would affect the sanctity of land and exempt it from tithes. That's going to be only biblical. But under rabbinic law, we were still going to treat it as being the land of Israel, and the product would require tithing under a derabanan requirement. This is not going to be the halacha, by the way. Halacha is going to follow like the Rambam. The Rambam is going to basically be saying, and he's going to be pulling his information from another sugya elsewhere, that it does not need tithing at all. But Rabbi Shimon is going to be holding that it does. And the idea here is going to be hearkening back to Rabbi Meir, who's basically going to be holding that the acquisition of the land of Israel is non-effect, and a non-Jew in Eretz Yisrael is biblically obligated to separate tithes, and just as Jewish grown produce in Eretz Yisrael, and so a Jew who would buy the product of a non-Jew would have to tithe it, and so the historical twist here is that Rebbe is recording here in the Mishneh as the Tanakama Rabbi Meir's view. And why are they doing this? They're doing this to try to preserve the institution of tithing altogether and stop it from being uprooted. Very, very interesting. We're going to get into Halacha 5 tomorrow about what happens when you're going to the inn and you're trying to get food. Have a great day.